First, welcome everyone. This is our third thought leadership program. We put together an executive panel. Very excited for today. We've got two highly engaging, very interesting and well-accomplished panelists with us today. We're talking about the important subjects of employee engagement and employee recognition. And really, this is designed to be three parts today. One is the trends. So what are we seeing today from all of the major research organizations there regarding employee experience, engagement, recognition, and rewards? So we'll do very briefly, what are the stats mid-2023 and how have they changed? And then we're going to ask our panelists to comment. Then we're going to go into engagement. What are people seeing in terms of engagement? And we're going to talk to our panelists about their respective organizations and what their colleagues and clients are doing. Then we're going to move into recognition. And what are we seeing in terms of practical tips and trends? So this is designed to be engaging. And what I mean by that is we will take questions from the audience. We have a large number of participants today, which is great. The good news is we have Tristan Hermanson, who is our national US and North America engagement leader that will be monitoring those questions. She will be interrupting us today so our panelists can discuss your specific questions. For those questions we don't get to, and it could be by size of organization, by function, or any other specifics, there will be an opportunity where you can opt in for a copy of this presentation, and you can submit questions or set up a brief time. And also, both of our panelists have agreed via LinkedIn, you can connect with them for further follow-up. So we should be able to address different size companies, different organizations here today, but if we miss your specific question, there will be an opportunity following today to ask some specifics regarding what's going on in your neck of the woods. So with that, we'll get right to it. Okay. This is our third thought leadership panel. My name is Matt Willis. I'm Senior Vice President, General Manager for North America for a company called Advantage Club. Most of you have not heard of Advantage Club. We are underneath the technology for over 1,200 companies, 3 million users, 120 countries. And what we do is we provide a platform for recognition and engagement and rewards. This is not going to be anything about our company today, but instead we bring on panelists to talk about what they're seeing in the industry. So with that, I want to introduce both Lisa and Randy. And Randy, we'll start with you. If you can talk to the audience and tell them who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Of course, and thanks again, Matt, for the opportunity to join you guys today. Randy Stovall. I am currently the Director of Talent Acquisition for Comfort Systems USA. No, we are not a mattress company and we don't build air conditioners, but we are a Fortune 1000 electrical, HVAC, mechanical construction company involved in commercial and industrial builds. So things like data centers, hospitals, schools, university systems, all of those things. We are approaching 15,000 employees, and we have we're made up of more than 45 unique operating companies that are in 170 locations. And prior to that, I've been involved in just about any business vertical that you can mention. Heavy IT, heavy engineering. I've done vertical work in banking, in high volume transactional work. You pretty much can name it. So some of my clients I've worked with in the past were companies like IBM, AT&T, Texas Instruments, doing both national and global work. And like I mentioned, pushing about 27 years in this, and I'm still partially sane.
Great. And Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Singh. I've been in benefits my whole career, different company industries, different company sizes. Most recently, I've been with Silicon Valley Bank for the last 11 years as a managing director of global benefits with responsibility for health and welfare, retirement, leaves, time off, perks, everything across the board. SVB had been in 12 countries with 8,000 employees. So over those 11 years, I was able to build the team and build the benefit programs. I'm sure you've heard of us in the news the last few months. So Silicon Valley Bank was purchased by First Citizens Bank as the US entity. And so currently with SVB as a division of First Citizens Bank, but I'll be able to talk through a lot of what we've done at SVB over the years around employee recognition, retention, et cetera. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you both. And our time today is going to be set up current workforce trends, and then we're going to move right into the nuts and bolts, employee needs, engaging employees, and what we're seeing on the recognition efforts. And as we're going through, just a reminder, you can enter questions. And hey, team, if we can have, we're gonna use Tristan, and I believe she has Garish's login to funnel all questions through Tristan, and she will interrupt us as we go. So this is going to be interactive. Okay, thanks. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to start with the trends. Next. Okay, so just a quick history lesson. Most all of you know this, but we're going to summarize. Pre-pandemic, there was a trend already in place where we were seeing, hey, rise of Gen Z, we were seeing trends towards, we need something beyond just punching the clock. We want to see culture, we want to see work-life balance. And along with that was this idea of a purposeful work. I need some sense of belonging. I need some sense of appreciation. So that was all occurring back before the pandemic came. Enter the pandemic, we're all upside down. Everything shuts down. And while things shut down, then we quickly get re-engaged and the job market tightens up really quickly. And we are understaffed to try to get people back in the doors. Along with this idea of silent quitting and the great resignation and a whole bunch of disengagement, we're all trying to figure out how to do hybrid work. And ultimately, we're now in a situation where we're running to technology for a number of these different areas, or re-looking at things that we all have been talking about, learning and development and well-being and setting up communities. All of this is escalated and accelerated to a point where we're trying to address new ways to both get employees, capture employees, retain employees, but make it a good workplace. And you can see this on the next slide. For roughly 25 years, there was little or no innovation regarding the HR landscape, HR innovation. All of a sudden, we come out of COVID, and the biggest area for investment in venture capital globally was HR tech. So we see an explosion of learning and development tools, an explosion of well-being apps, a whole bunch of companies reassessing candidate experience, a whole bunch of companies looking at how are we measuring people today. So this big explosion of technology, really driven by the fact our C-suite is recognizing, hey, our employees are central to our success, and we're seeing that even through today. Next slide. So we're going to get to our panelists. Where are we at today? Well, we're still post-pandemic. We're still dealing with a lot of those hybrid issues. Job market is tough, but we have a twist. So starting in Q4 last year, we've got economic uncertainty. And why is that? Well, we're either facing a recession, we're not facing a recession, but led by, in Lisa's neck of the world, the big tech companies having layoffs. And so not only are we dealing with all of the changes we mentioned, but here we have this 2023 mid-year uncertainty. And so with that, you get not only people that are laid off or facing transitions, which is a tremendous amount of folks, but for those that are there, survivor's syndrome, looking over our back. And because of that disengagement today, we're accelerating these efforts, some companies better than others, on engagement efforts. So I want to pause there, and I want to start with Lisa. If you want to talk about what trends have you seen that we haven't talked about, and maybe what were you doing at Silicon Valley Bank? And of course, you know, over the last year at Silicon Valley Bank, you had a firsthand view with some of the uncertainty. So if you want to speak to some of the trends and how your organization was dealing with it.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. You know, I think definitely during the pandemic, we saw a lot of movement around mental health, well-being in general, all aspects of well-being, and family support programs. And so we did a lot of efforts in those areas. And kind of post-pandemic, we've continued in that genre of continuing to offer those programs. I think what we see now is that different in the employee expectation. So now the employee is expecting work to fit around their life and not to adjust their life for work. So employers are having to rethink and adjust that employee value proposition and how we're engaging with employees. And a lot of that we need to look at kind of crosses over in not only continuing with DE&I efforts, but the role of technology. And to your point with the layoffs and the economic downturn, you know, employees are still expecting more from their employers. And so what we look at is how can we leverage communication to promote what we already have? So rather than rolling out new programs, can we communicate more of what we have today and get more value out of that? So more employee awareness. So creating new benefit newsletters, training more of the HR staff to communicate around our benefit programs, those types of efforts around communication, engaging with employee resource groups and leveraging that. And then also, you know, technologies and efficiencies. How are we using technology to enhance our processes and our efficiencies, how we're engaging with employees from a cost standpoint, focusing on that as well. And then finally, you know, I think employees are still looking for choice and flexibility. So trying to build in choice where we are able to. So with the return to office, you know, where can we give employees choice if we want them to come in? You know, is it what days they come in or how they're engaging? And with our managers, we created team agreements to help give employees that choice a little bit. And then the recognition, again, how can we help engage employees with less money and potentially retain them, leveraging recognition and career skills and enhancements. So those are some of the trends that I've been seeing.
That's great. How about you, Randy?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything that Lisa said. I think those are all great points. I think where I sit within the business vertical that we're in, we are just looking at a different type of challenge than I think tech and some of the other business verticals are. For example, we didn't have layoffs. We didn't have a slowdown. It never stopped. We continued all the way through, you know, like when the tech layoffs occurred, we were still looking for the same, if not more, people around the country, usually over 2,000 to 2,500 open positions at any given time. Our challenge is continuing to engage and try to engage with late-born millennials, Gen Zs, and like it or not, Gen Alpha is already entering our workforce. And the average age of somebody in the industry that I'm involved in now is more than 55 years old. And what that means is we just don't have skilled people to go out and to build these data centers and everything else that needs to be built out there. So we have the challenge, you know, like everyone else does, but in a really elevated way of how do we connect with Gen Z and how do we show them that, you know, construction and construction engineering and services and technology is a decent choice. We all know that, I think Gen Z is kind of the elephant in the room. It gets rid. I don't know about you guys, but and I've just heard way too many times they're just too lazy. They don't want to get involved. If you are a millennial or a Gen Xer, and if you think back at the beginning of your career, they said the same thing about you guys. And I think that that's a cop-out that we usually fall back on. So we are coming back up and being challenged of how do we even just initiate engagement? And some basic mistakes that I think a lot of our operating companies have made, but they're moving and correcting on now. Just taking job descriptions and reposting them as a job ad without telling them, as Lisa said, the employee value proposition right up front. They want to know in the first 3 to 8 seconds, what is it that you're going to do for me if I pay attention to this job? People say that they're lazy. Indeed did a study not that long ago and just kind of ran some data. The average job seeker right now is filling out 22 applications before they decide which company to join. I know I told one of my managers that number, and I said, I don't think that shows that they're lazy. And their reply back to me was, well, I think they're just shopping our job offers. So sometimes we're just always looking for a reason to say no when we need to look for transferable skills and say yes. There is a large pool of candidates that are out there, but they are just not in the traditional way going to be found like we have in the past. They're usually identified as stars, if you've ever heard that term, skilled through alternate routes. And it's all about looking for them that have those transferable skills that can fit into our industry, and especially in construction when we're battling so many openings that we just can't fill. So those are some of the trends I've seen. I'll throw one other thing out there too. LinkedIn also did a study stating that the average worker is going to have to learn 3 new job skills between now and the end of next year to stay pertinent and to stay interested in your company. And the companies that are doing that are retaining them 1.5 to 3 years longer on the average. So I think continuing to offer upskilled and up training is going to be vital for us in the future, much more than it has in the past.
Wow, those are great stats. I also love that you brought this back to when we're talking about employee retention and engagement, that goes hand in hand with how are we recruiting folks. And that, is the full circle of employees. Great, thank you both. Tristan, we'll get back to just a couple quick slides on the trends.
One quick question for Randy. What does STARS stand for?
Skilled through alternate routes. And so they're basically people that are not involved in your industry right now, but have transferable skills that can fit into your industry. They can block out in 3 different categories. Those that are already making too much money that even if you could transfer them, they're not going to be interested. Those that have already equaled out in pay and what they might have in the future, but so they're not going to transfer over easily. But then there's another group of people that they identify that are well within your pay structure that are just looking for that transferable skill. They identify as about 31 million people in the United States. That's a healthy job pool. An example of somebody with STARS might be with the military that are transitioning out into the civilian workforce. 2 to 250,000 transition every year, along with many of them have spouses. And so taking a look at those and saying, okay, well, somebody who moved men and equipment and women and equipment all across the world, basically multi-million-dollar efforts on a logistic point, can they be a project manager? Well, the answer is yes. And they've got those transferable skills to move over, but we just haven't been paying attention to it. I hope that answers your question.
That was great. Thank you. So if we move on, we got 2 more slides here just on some stats for y'all to take back. 2023, it's a crisis. And what do I mean by crisis? 65% of people are disengaged. That's US study, and that comes from both Gallup and Microsoft, meaning that we have people that, yes, they're in your organization, yes, they are working, but they have indicated they're open to other work, or they are self-indicating that they're probably not putting in 100%. So 33% new hires leave within 90 days, 46% of employees are silently quitting from Microsoft. What does that mean? Well, that means turnover and disengagement is causing a huge cost, not only to our employees, right? Our employees that are there, that well-being, that appreciation, that support, but also single disengaged employee is costing up to 34% of salary. And Deloitte did a study on that. And hiring is costly. It's getting even more costly. So as Randy pointed out, when we're going to those traditional methods, whether it's staffing or our own, ways to bring in employees, it's costing more to bring in an employee. So that disengagement and resulting turnover, right? There's a bigger cost today. We're really in a situation when it's a crisis. And if we go to the next slide,
Matt,
go ahead.
I
Yeah.
wanted to highlight something here. When the stat about 33% of new hires leaving within 90 days, to Randy's point, the difficulty of hiring people today is a challenge. And so once you hire them, you do want to keep them. And that onboarding experience, I think, is critical. So I think making sure that the recruiters, when they're bringing people on board, and the managers are presenting a realistic expectation of what the role is and also what the company is. And so with a realistic expectation, that'll help reduce that turnover within 90 days. And then secondly, what the onboarding experience is. So you want that experience to match what was sold to them during the recruiting process. So things we've done, new hire gifts on onboarding, specific onboarding website with resources, and then giving managers tools as well to help the onboarding process, to help them onboard that new hire. And then finally help, we were working on improving the technology and logistics of onboarding as well. So once you get them, to keep them, that first 90 days is critical.
And I am so glad you interrupted, Lisa, because I was getting ready to do it, but you did it for me. Once again, thank you, ma'am. But I'll give you even a worse stat on that same thing, Matt, and that is that 49% of people who had a poor onboarding experience either quit or nearly quit within 24 hours. That's frightening to me. The other thing is just taking that a step back when it comes to just attracting them. Two quick things. One of them is I am a broken record with our recruiters, HR people, and operating companies that job ads are not job descriptions are not job ads. Take the time and catch their attention. Make sure it's optimized for SEO, depending on what industry you're in. Anywhere between as little as 40 and as much as 80% of your applicants are filling out their applications on their phone. If it is not optimized right, it won't read right. They'll just quit and give up because they have choices. They don't have to do what you're asking them to do. That's just the bottom line. If it takes more than 4 or 5 minutes to fill out that application, your drop rate really, really goes up. And by drop rate, I mean somebody sees your company, they have an impression, they might click, they might even start to apply, but then they get frustrated and quit. Appcast gave a number that it's as high as 92% within United States companies. That means that for every 10 people you find you want to recruit, you're going to lose 9 of them, up to 9 of them. That, again, is a frightening stat. And one of the things they hate the absolute most is having to register on your site to be able to even do an application on your site. So if you want a challenge, when you finish this call, if you haven't done it already, I challenge you to go to your phone and apply to your own job. And if it takes too long, then you need to look at changing it, because you're losing people before you even get a chance to tell them what the EVP is or the onboarding experience is. So back this up all the way out to where you first start reaching out to them. Even in the way that you write your jobs, it's kind of a sad tell on the United States educational system, but your ads are going to get read about 65% more if you write them at a 5th grade level. It's just the way that it is. So pay attention to the data that's out there and make it adapt to the audience you're trying to reach. That's one of the biggest things I can share.
Man, terrific and practical. So thank you both. Let's go right to just our follow-up on that, which is the crisis that we just discussed. And then we can look at, hey, compounded by what our executives are telling us. And as Tristan tees that up, we go back one. There we go. So let's go backwards. So we all agree the recruiting process is critical, onboarding is critical. And then once we get people in the door, you know, are we practicing what we preach? So, you know, what we're putting in that job description, right? Or how we're recruiting people, is it legitimate? We can go to these Glassdoor or Indeed and talk about, hey, what does the company employees say, right? So we can't make up what the culture is. We're going to get a pretty good handle on that. And the difference is, if we talk to anyone, if we were all in a room and I said, hey, how many people are recognizing their employees? 90% of you will shoot up their hands. Of course, we're recognizing employees. But if I go to your actual employees, and they will say, hey, only 40% have been adequately recognized by a supervisor, and 65% will say, well, actually, I really haven't had any recognition over the last year. So there's a big disconnect in what some of the boards or some of our C-levels think we're doing in terms of recognition and what actually our employees want, right? Now let's throw in hybrid, and we have all sorts of additional issues, right? We want that flexibility, but the well-being, that human connection, is really at a loss. So wrapping up our trends, we have a lot of things coming at us in today's job market. And then how do we address these two big issues of engagement and recognition? So next slide. Okay, let's start with engagement. Next slide. All right, so we're seeing kind of three big permeating thoughts around employee involvement or engagement. One is employees are telling us, this is through numerous channels, more transparency, and I want to be included, right? So what are we seeing? We're seeing a lot of technology that Lisa referenced. Obviously the virtual events, but also using technology to get better pulse check on employees, using different ways of getting feedback about employee needs. And then we're seeing employee resource groups. And we'll get the panelists to weigh in here shortly. Employee resource groups are where we have a company that has heard from lots of folks that say, hey, diversity is a real issue here. And what we do as an organization is we create a committee, we create a group, and we have lots of employees, and sometimes it's anyone that wants to join. And we create a group that does an actionable plan and starts to move that ball forward on these areas. So whether it's learning or development or any sort of company-wide involvement or issue, we've got people on the ground weighing in. And then we're seeing an additional increased management and employee time. So what we're seeing there is better training. We're training up our managers. It's not just a one-on-one to discuss what you did, you know, in your performance, but spending a little bit of time saying, hey, how you doing? You know, where do you want to get to? And then when we go to the second part, that is extended into that training and development in terms of specific actionable items, training the managers, training the trainers, right? In terms of, hey, how can we find out informally what our employees want and need? No size fits all. And then actually showing that support from the company. We're actually showing that caring. So how are we seeing this? Lots of different ways that we're seeing changes in individual organizations, but we're seeing company actions that are actually taking place. So rather than the employee survey going out once a year, yes, this is a problem, we're seeing actionable items and, hey, we heard you and here's what we're doing about it. And then furthermore, that digitization. So what does that mean? That people have more access and different channels of communication than just the emails or just the participation on the quarterly questionnaires. We're seeing more ways to get people involved with their well-being, their learning, their engagement. So those are our three big trends we're seeing in terms of involvement. I want to turn it back, and Lisa, let's start with you. What are you seeing or what has been happening, or where are you going towards in terms of employee involvement?
Yeah, I think everything you talked about, Matt, really resonates. And that social connection, I think, is where we're going to get that retention and engagement of employees is how can we continue to connect employees? There's studies that talk about, if you have a best friend at work, or if you've got someone you connect with at work, that helps retain you. And so how can we leverage all of those different methods and opportunities to connect people, whether it is through the employee resource groups or interest groups? We've done some things like America's Got Talent. So we had a talent competition, and getting creative to help get people together and get connected. And then we don't want to forget the role of the manager and how important the manager is. So how can we help prop up the manager to help engage with the employees? Because the manager is being asked to do more and more these days. And I really worry about everything we're piling on the manager in addition to their day job to do. And so what tools and resources can we give managers to help support them? So kind of importance of one-on-ones or team meetings, are there templates or tools that we can give them to help structure those? I was at another conference recently, and one company does a leadership behavior card, and it's 10 different characteristics that a leader should have that they use before each meeting, with simple things like be in the moment, be authentic, be transparent, respect different opinions. And so giving a manager kind of that reference tool just to keep in mind to help keep focused on the employees, that I think kind of that manager is going to be key as always in retaining employees, and how can the company help support the manager? And then finally, bringing everybody together across silos. I know a lot of times we're working in our own functions, but the employee doesn't care who owns a program or who owns a function. We're looking at from the employee experience lens. I would work with our DE&I team and our talent development team and corporate social responsibility on coming together to create webinars or interactive events, such as a Family First Friday we had, of bringing parents together and having topics and dialogue. And I hosted with an expert a monthly mental well-being and you, where there was a lot of employee interaction, but we did it across aisles. So we were sharing resources and getting consistent themes and complementing each other versus working in silos. So that's one suggestion I would make, as well as, think about it from the employee experience lens and how they're receiving everything we're doing, and structure it so you have that in mind.
Great. Randy?
Yeah, again, agree. So I don't ramble too much, Tristan. Can you go back to the other slide? Because basically I'd like to have a full day on each one of those 3 bullet points just to even start breaking ground. Kind of along with what Lisa was saying, though, I really do think that it's true with our managers. We're putting more and more on them. I think AI, if you've not started using it, I'm sure everybody has to some level. AI is going to be a big assistance in things like that, to being able to just offload a lot off of their shoulders. But your managers being able to be effective with their employees, the people that are working with them and for them, is just vital. You probably heard it said that people come for money, but they stay for culture. There's also the other statement that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so I can't emphasize that enough either. Transparency and inclusion. I think this is true on everything, D&I efforts, all the way to, again, stepping back the clock and just saying, how are we presenting our jobs? You can study Indeed, Zip, Monster, any other company that's out there that puts data together, and they'll tell you that you're going to get a much better response on your job ads if you put the money up there along with it. People want to see what it is. They want that transparency. There are already places in the country where if you are posting a job, you must put the pay range on there. I live in Colorado, and the entire state of Colorado mandates that. So if you're not being transparent now, you might as well get ready to, because even if you don't want to, you're probably going to be forced to. And that, I think, is a good thing. And I'll just take that a step further. The end game on that kind of pay transparency is that anyone in your company, they want anyone in your company to be able to know what everyone else in your company makes at any given time. They want that information out there. It's not there yet. Maybe they'll be able to cordon that off, but right now that's the end game. So start being extremely transparent about your inclusion into your D&I, about your pay. And if you're offering something to them, you better be able to produce, because bad news always travels faster than good news. The employee development, again, completely agree on that. And that's just going back with the skills that someone needs to learn just to stay current with their job and to stay interested and engaged with your particular company or division. Caring, the Gen Z thing. If you haven't done it, you should take a little bit of a history roll back along with a sociology type viewpoint and take a look at why Gen Z doesn't trust us. Why late born millennials were job and growth time in probably in history, right? Except for maybe the end parts of the greatest generation that was out there. We've gone from having over 50% middle class to probably around 20%. It might even be less now. CNN did an article not that long ago and just asked a bunch of Gen Zers how much money do they need to make to be able to be well off, and it was around $218,000 a year. And that's because, when I was growing up, if you were middle class, you could have a good life. Now middle class has shrunk drastically, and they see that I'm either going to be rich or I'm going to be poor. So that's why that employee value proposition is so important. And if you're going to put something out in front of them that says, hey, we've got a career path for you, you can't just say it anymore. You're going to have to show it to them right up front. And then you need to be able to back up your words with actions. And again, I mean, if we had another full week, we could probably talk about this a lot more because it's a really engaging thought.
Terrific insights from both of you. Tristan will go next one. So we're going to do this real quick. This is a really busy slide. I'm just going to summarize it. We have a next slide to summarize. What are we seeing? This from Josh Burson Company. This is a data set from over a decade. Lots of different companies. What is emerging? Trust, transparency, inclusion, and caring. And what we're seeing is the themes in terms of very high importance from employees are the work, strong leadership, purposeful work, trust in the company. We're also seeing this career growth or development that we just discussed. Then we're seeing the well-being and health. The other big one is this supportive workplace. So that appreciation, that recognition, that inclusion, that diversity, those are the themes that are really emerging stronger and stronger today. Next slide. This is another way to say the same thing, and that is, what are the growing predictors of job satisfaction? And these are kind of the big six. So based on a lot of different large research companies, we've got to be flexible, but we need that recognition. The more, the better. Purposeful work, belief in your company, not only in the product and service, but that the company trusts us and supports us. Then a sense of belonging. We have that values around the sense of belonging and the opportunity for growth, which is that development, that career path. So the good news is, if we're addressing these, you are going to differentiate yourself from your competitors. That's where employees are going to flock to. That's where your solid culture is going to be met. In the alternative, if we're not doing these things, there is going to be a wider discrepancy between those that are addressing these issues, employee-led, and those that aren't. And it is going to be transparent. It's hard to hide bad culture in today's environment. So if we go to the next slide. Okay. We're going to move into recognition because I know there's a lot of good discussion here with our panelists. But with recognition, this is a very broad term, right? It's appreciation, it's rewards, it's how we recognize employees, and that comes in a number different fashions. But we all know that there is a growing need that our employees are saying, hey, I want to be heard, I want to be seen, I want to be recognized for what I'm doing. And if we go to the next slide, the big thing that we're seeing is an expansion of recognition opportunities. So before we go to our panel, we just want to hit on 5 of the big ones that we're seeing. The first thing to note is in terms of recognition, traditionally, let's go back 5 years, let's go back 10 years, annual awards banquet or quarterly employee, and maybe there was a plaque, right? Today, we're seeing efforts to include more ways to recognize one another, right? Going back to what Lisa said, that human connection. So we're seeing service markers. What are service markers? If you have hourly employees, we're seeing, hey, 30 days on the job. We're celebrating that. We're putting it out on the app. And we're saying, congratulations. Or a training module, learning development. We're seeing service markers that are not only congratulated, but sent to some of our peers. We're seeing birthdays and anniversaries, but not just the plaque, right? Not just the pen. We're seeing flexible rewards, and we're seeing other opportunities and different types of milestones to hit where we're recognizing people. Then we're seeing those groups and committees, not only the company-led employee resource groups, but we're seeing a bunch of clients come to us and say, hey, look, we have a bunch of people that like photography or that like to hike. It's not really an employee resource group, but can you connect those people among the different silos? Absolutely. And let's create a photography club. Let's create a cooking club. Let's create opportunities and communities for people to engage. So we're seeing a lot of that. And then finally, we're seeing just good old-fashioned contests, but it's not just sales contests. We might have engagement events around Black History Month, Volunteering Month, the Super Bowl, FIFA World Cup, short-term engagement events, but it gets us involved. And so we're seeing creativity, we're seeing fun, we're seeing more opportunities to really appreciate other people. More frequent, more personal. So let me go back to our panelists. What have you been doing or have you seen, and what are you looking towards in the future with your respective organizations? When we start this time, we'll start with Randy and go to Lisa.
Well, you pretty much said it all in the little yellow bar there at the bottom, personal and more often. That's got to be the pattern. And again, it's so funny because you tell hiring managers that they just, oh God, they're spoiled. They're just so spoiled. No, they're not. We made them that way. If you've got kids, or if you've had kids that played t-ball, soccer, basketball, whatever else when they were 5, 6 years old, you don't get a first place trophy anymore. My God, they don't even keep score. And you don't get a first or second place, you get a participation ribbon, and everybody gets the same ribbon or trophy. So they're used to, from an early age, we've taught them that kind of inclusivity within it, and they expect recognition and reward. Don't blame them for what we made them to be. And yes, I think it is important. It needs to be done more often, whether it's something as simple as badging, increasing your review time with them from every year to every 6 months, trimesterally, even quarterly in some of them. Some of our hourly workers and travelers and temps, that quarterly is the only way to go because they have a very short memory and they're in high demand. So it has to be done. So whether it's something like that, whether it's a full review, whether it's giving them a day off for making a significant accomplishment, and by the way, that day off seems to mean more to them than anything else. They'll value that. At least that's what we're seeing. Lisa can disagree or anything else on it, because I'm sure it changes business vertical to business vertical. Sometimes it's being able to make a donation in their name to a cause that really, really matters to them. And then letting everyone know in your company that that's been done that way, and put it on your company pages so that it's seen that way. But I couldn't say it more simply than what you did there at the bottom, Matt, with more frequent, more often, be consistent with it.
Lisa?
Yeah, and I agree with everything both of you just said. So as you look at from a company standpoint, what company-wide recognition can you do? And what we had done was, annual excellence awards, client service awards, values awards. So we would have these big annual awards, which was great because at a company level, you were getting recognized and you had been nominated by others within the organization and leadership. Then we would have departments, and each department did their own thing. So there wasn't a lot of guidance or support. But for HR, for example, we would have our, HR award. Nice, but even for us, I had a senior leader on my team who received a certificate for achievement for something that she did, and she had been nominated by the leaders in the department, and that meant so much to her that she framed it. So part of that too is knowing and looking at, from an individual basis, what motivates individuals, and it's different person by person, and so managers being aware of that makes a difference as well. And then you have recognition on your team. So, shouting out and, building into regular team meetings, an opportunity to recognize each other within your team or across your teams as well. And then we also did, milestone anniversary awards for service awards. And we had a luncheon with the CEO where the employee who received the milestone along with their manager would be flown in. And the manager would stand up in this room and talk about all of your accomplishments. And then the CEO would comment on that. And so that public recognition of your manager with your peers and other leaders, along with the CEO, went a really long way as well. And then, as you mentioned, Matt, things like, birthdays, celebrating birthdays. I still think there's opportunities for better tools to support some of these avenues that we didn't have any infrastructure in place. So for our HR department, we would throw up a slide for birthdays and anniversaries, and we got so big, it was just really ineffective. Sometimes we had wrong data. And I know for me, I don't track birthdays well, so I'd miss a birthday on my team. So something that we needed was a better, tool around recognition on tracking some of these things, and how we can more easily say great job to anybody in the organization. And so I think that was something that we had lacking, that we were starting to look at, was how can we build that tool and that infrastructure to leverage technology and more easily say great job, which can go a long way in keeping people.
And I think I just kind of want to tag on to that with Lisa, that have some, have variety, because what's important to one person isn't going to be as important to the next person, right? For example, birthdays, I don't want recognition on my birthday. I've had enough of them. I'm kind of over that. Plus, the fact that I was born on April Fool's Day, my goal is just to be out of the country every time on my birthday if I can. But with some of the others, it makes a big difference. My team is scattered. My team, our team, the TA team, is scattered all over the country. And so the opportunity when we get together to make little celebrations like that do mean a lot, but different things mean more to others than maybe it does to yourself, or vice versa. So kind of treat that reward section, I think, not as, here's what you get, here's a buffet, and here's what we can offer you. When you go to dinner, do you want somebody to order for you, or do you want to order for yourself?
That's a great. And we
Matt, we got a few questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So actually, perfect. It follows that. What are some effective strategies for measuring employee engagement levels? And then a second part to that is, as an HR leader, how do I easily get exec buy-in? So I can repeat that. What are some effective strategies for measuring employee engagement levels? And how do I get exec buy-in?
So I'll start with employee engagement, measuring employee engagement. There's the standard, employee survey, whether you're doing it annually or, Matt, to your point, we're doing it more frequently now, and we need more frequent results. In the past, our employee engagement survey, we would do it once a year, and then about 4 months later, the employees would get the results, and another 2 months later, managers would have action plans. And then you'd have your next survey again before anything was done. So I think leveraging those tools, but needing a much quicker turnaround time and more frequent feedback, and having those employee surveys be meaningful and getting the data from it and turning it into information and those action plans and talking about it and being transparent about it is very important. And then holding people accountable to making changes based on that feedback. And then also leveraging more frequent little, pulse surveys. Again, leverage technology and send out pulse surveys, whether it's to the whole company or specific groups. And I think those can be very effective in getting real-time feedback of what's going on. But to your point of executive buy-in, you can do all of this, but if the leadership is not bought into making changes and taking the feedback seriously, then it's going to actually have a negative effect and a counter effect. And I don't have an answer to easily getting executive buy-in, but what I would say is tie it back to productivity and tie it back to the values of the company. So what are the values of the company? And if you're living those values, how are you taking that feedback and applying it to that? And then again, from a productivity and engagement standpoint, leverage all the data that Randy was talking about, and Matt, about the expense of turnover, how much money it takes to hire somebody and to retain somebody if they leave. And so if you're not doing these things, those are the outcomes. So I think those are a couple suggestions I would have.
Yeah, and that's kind of a loaded question, and I'm not avoiding it, but I want to kind of justify my answer here. I think a lot of it has to do with your business vertical, the size of your company, who you are, what you're doing. Employee surveys, couldn't agree more. I think it's a great tool to be able to use. In the industry that I'm in now, where 80% of them are involved in trades, if I send out those surveys, I'd be lucky to get 5% of them back. It just doesn't work in our industry. So we have to look at a different twist on that and be more reliant on localized teams to be able to do it. And usually it falls either on that manager or usually on safety, because safety is something that is vital to us on every step that we make. And so they engage with all of the workers that are out there on that force. So you have to think about what is going to give you the results that you're looking for, at least to give you the data. Data is not any good if you're not getting enough of it, and if it's not right. If the numbers are right, it's right. If they're not accurate, you're not getting anywhere. So I think you have to look at that. Technology, I agree, is important. And again, where's your company on that? Do you have a LMS system? If you have an LMS system, you've probably got a great tool in front of you there to start making some initial steps. If you don't, you're going to have to get creative in the way that you go out and get that data. But it all comes down to asking the question. A lot of times we don't ask the question because we really don't want the answer. We just did a recruiter HR boot camp for our companies. We had about 85 or 90 of our people from our various companies around the country show up. And one of the complaints that I hear, because I travel a lot, I get a chance to go visit all these places around. And one of the biggest complaints I hear recruiters make, and if there's recruiters on this call here, you're gonna find out that this is probably you. I get frustrated with my hiring managers. They don't get back to me fast enough. They don't tell me why they're rejecting somebody. They don't include me as part of their team, and blah, 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 blah. So I flipped the script and I went out and got some data about what do your hiring managers think about you? And the truth is that only 25% of the hiring managers that I could find data on would recommend their HR staff and their recruiters if they were asked to. That tells me that we have a lot of work to do on our side, just about improving communications and becoming a part of the team, to become a trusted advisor, whether you're in HR, whether you're in recruiting, or whether you're in both, to be able to be a part of that operational side. Recruiting is definitely not seen as a part of operations in most of our companies, and they are viewed as part of HR. HR is administrative. Operations is where you get dirty and you make the money. And we have to find a way to be able to break into that operations part, to be able to be the trusted advisors we need to be, to even start getting the data and make some of these initial changes. So again, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this point, but I think you got to step back, because you're asking questions that might be too far down the road before you need to go back and answer some of these earlier situations.
No, I think that's right on, Randy. Thank you both. We are down to just about 3 minutes left. So we have just about one more slide here, and then we're going to have closing remarks from our expert panel. So if we want to just wrap this up, we talked about what's different in reward. The key word is flexibility, right? Rewards do work, but let's think about those and let's think about how we're getting them. Next slide. Goes a long way, that thanks. Next slide. Poll question is going out to everyone. And just a reminder, if you'd like a copy of this webinar, just let us know. We'll send that over to you. But we want to talk about, hey, the upside of all this. A lot of challenges, but what is the result of higher employee engagement? Well, productivity, lower turnover, higher revenue per employee, lower absenteeism, higher customer satisfaction. At the end of the day, we like coming into work more. You know, we have connections. We believe in what we do. We believe that companies got our back. So all of this is something that, hey, it's a range. We're all moving and marching in this direction, but it will pay off. So with that, we're going to close up. If you can just move to the next slide, we're going to pass this up. And we're going to close with this. To win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace. Doug Conant, big CEO, multiple brands. And I want to just say thank you to both Randy and Lisa. Lots of really good practical tips here. We will be sending out the opportunity for other people to ask customized questions, again, depending on industry, size of company, all of those good things. But I'll let either one of you decide who wants to just put some closing comments here for the rest of our audience. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks, Randy. You know, I would say just with the new employee expectation, you know, companies showing that they care about their employees is fundamental. And there's so many different ways you can do that. And there's so many different avenues and opportunities, you know, with recognition, with well-being programs, you know, how managers are showing up, that I think that the business case is, you know, if you're not engaging with your employees, listening to them and adjusting to this new world and this new environment, then they'll have a negative impact on your business outcomes.
Yeah, and I just, you know, once again, thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you on all of these things. I know we probably have created more questions than answers for you. And I'm hoping that it generates a lot of thought process. Each one of you are unique in the company that you're with the culture you're with the vertical that you're working within, but we're all facing the same challenges, and that's how to attract, how to get them on board, and then how to keep them on board. So I would love the opportunity to connect with you on LinkedIn if you decide you would like to. You gave us the honor of spending an hour of your time. I think I certainly owe you that opportunity to give it back if we can ever connect and talk further. So thank you very much. And the biggest thing that I can say is data, be data driven in what you're doing. Don't make guesses. If it's not working, stop and find out a different way to be able to get it, what it needs to be accomplished.
Terrific. Thank you both. And thank you to our folks that ran the webinar. Thank you to Tristan, and thank you all for attending. And we will be following up with all of you. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.